Live, it's Drive Time Sports with Jordan Buscarini on KOAL 107.3 FM at 7:50 a.m.
'Cause every minute, every hour, you'll be shaken by the stranger by
We're just a few hours away from the NBA draft. Crazy day, crazy 24 hours. We go back to the Marcus Smart trade last night. Kristaps Porzingis on his way to the Boston Celtics. Earlier today, Jordan Poole on his way to Washington. Chris Paul's got a new home with the Golden State Warriors. Trades all over the place, and we're going to have plenty of time to talk about those deals, but I also want to focus on the prospects in tonight's draft. We know that Victor Wembanyama will be the number one pick, so Charlotte is essentially on the clock. And they have been a team for the last couple of weeks where there's been all kinds of speculation floating around. Would they move on from the number 2 pick? Would they be able to grab Zion Williamson? Who do they go with? Is it Brandon Miller? Is it Scoot Henderson? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the prospects in tonight's draft. Joining us right now, we have Tom Perkins, who's an independent NBA scout. You can read all of Tom's stuff at hoopcitynews.com. He's got a tremendous mock draft out that you can follow tonight for the draft itself. Tom, it's always a pleasure to get you on. Thank you.
Ready to go. I'll tell you what, Jordan, this is a fun time of the year, although I'll get no sleep for the next 8 hours, I can tell you that.
Well, you put your top 30 players to be selected in the draft tonight, and really when I go over it, Tom, I really can't find anything that I disagree with on this mock. I know at some point we're going to be thrown a curveball. It happens every single season, but we'll start with the Charlotte Hornets. And you have Brandon Miller sitting here at number 2 rather than Scoot Henderson. Now, going back to the show on Monday, we talked about both of these prospects. Brandon Miller's got the size, 6'9", 200 pounds. You look at Scoot Henderson, here's a kid that's 6'2", 195 pounds. We talked about the pros and cons size-wise. Why do you say Brandon Miller coming in at number 2 over Scoot Henderson for the Hornets?
Well, he's more polished. He's a better shooter, a decidedly better shooter. The thing about those two is they each had individual workouts with Charlotte, and then Charlotte brought them both back together at the same time, where they kind of went head-to-head. And strangely enough, Brandon Miller showed better than Scoot. So it's not necessarily a knock on Scoot. It's just the fact that Brandon Miller is more ready for the NBA game than Scoot is. But I think Scoot has a fantastic, future in the NBA.
You know, when I look at the Hornets in general, they could go like 4 different ways tonight, right? I mean, they really, really could. The knock on Scoot, 6'2", 190 pounds and 195 pounds. Yeah, but he's got Derrick Rose athleticism. He's got a 6'9" wingspan. I think when you break down the intangibles, you can maybe look past those size red flags. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you could. I think you're right about that because, he plays his position bigger than 6'2", whereas 6'9", Brandon Miller, of course, he's a small forward. That's where he belongs. But Scoot Henderson can play point or even a shooting guard if he develops his shot more.
Tom, obviously here in the state of Utah, people are very into what the Utah Jazz are going to do tonight. Danny Ainge has done a terrific job of acquiring enough draft picks for 2 teams over the next 5-6 years. There's absolutely no possible way that Utah is going to be able to use every single draft pick over the next 4 years that they have acquired. However, tonight we'll see Utah pick 9. We'll see the Jazz a little bit later on in the draft as well as they float at 16, and then they'll have that 3rd pick at number 28. Do you foresee the Jazz selecting all 3 of those first-round picks tonight?
Well, it depends if they can. If anybody else likes some of these people, if another team likes, Culabelli, or if, let's say, somebody likes Jalen Hood, if another team likes it, they might want to go for that. But I could see them pick all 3 of those picks.
And those are the two guys that you just mentioned that you have mocked to Utah. So at number 9, Bilal Coulibaly, again, 6'7", 200 pounds, small forward out of France for those who are not too familiar. And then at 16, you have him going Jalen Hood-Schiff. And this is a 6'5" point guard / shooting guard. He's got some size, got some girth to him. He's around the 215-pound mark. And then you go to the 28th pick, and you have the Jazz going small forward, this time out of Gonzaga. So you like wings for Utah. That's where you have these guys mocked.
Yes, they're pretty much wing players, and that's what they're looking for at this point in time.
Tom, who are some of the prospects that maybe aren't getting a ton of, I guess we could say, pub ahead of the draft tonight that you really like? I mean, you and I were talking about one off the cuff, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But who are a couple that you look at and say, this could be a steal for a team? Nobody's really talking about this guy.
Well, the guy that will probably be picked at 17, Jordan Hawkins. He's from UConn. He obviously is a guy that played on a championship team. He might be a real sleeper, and I think Rob Pelinka is right on point on how he looks at Jordan Hawkins. So that's a real possibility. And then the second Thompson brother, the first Thompson brother is going to go in the first 7, I think. Let's see, Asur Thompson was going to go about number 6, but his brother's probably going to go in the second round, and he's almost just as good as his brother, so that's a kind of a sleeper. There's also a guy that played in the finals of last year's NCAA tournament from San Diego State, Matthew Bradley. Now, I have seen him up close and personal for years because I know his coach really well, which the guy that used to coach him, which is Curtis Conde. And this guy is an athlete, big time, and he's strong, and he can shoot the 3. That could be a real sleeper late in the second round, or maybe not even drafted. But he'll make a team somebody at some place. So Matthew Bradley could be a sleeper.
One guy I brought up to you is Drew Timme, and when you look at the college resume, boy, this is as decorated as it gets in this day and age with the one-and-done rule. And, we don't have the one-and-done rule anymore in college, but when we did have the one-and-done rule, this is as decorated as a player as you could possibly get. I have a hard time believing that Drew Timme doesn't hear his name tonight. I know we only have, 58 picks between the first and second round. But, Tom, I simply cannot believe that there are 58 better prospects than him based off what we have seen at the college game. And I understand he's not flashy. I understand that the athleticism may be a little bit of a problem. But at the end of the day, analytics be damned. A basketball player is a basketball player. And if there's one thing that Drew Timme showed us at Gonzaga, this guy's a basketball player.
Yes, he is. Well, you have to understand, too, Jordan, that many of these guys went to the pre-draft camp, and they didn't show very well, some of them. And Drew Timme was one of them.
Still, though, I mean, even with that being said, a camp, I get, but the body of work is there. We've seen this guy from every possible angle during his time at Gonzaga. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is I believe he can be serviceable, and I think that there are bigs that you could pair him with from a fundamental set where he would match perfectly.
Yeah, I would agree with that, sure, because, he does have a solid background, and he was, of course, very well coached at Gonzaga. I mean, that guy, Coach Few, is a super coach, and he got a lot of good, coaching from that guy, and so therefore, yeah, he could go higher, maybe middle second round.
A kid I want to talk to you about out of Southern California, you have Jaime Jaquez for UCLA mocked at around 21. Again, a very decorated kid at UCLA. Here's a senior, and if you go down a lot of mock drafts, in the first round, it's rare to find a kid who is a senior. The majority of them are freshmen and sophomores, right? We have international players that are young. These the scouts, they love the youth, right? There's more room for development. What is it with Jaime that makes you say, okay, this is a kid that is worthy of a first-round pick, and he's polished enough coming out of UCLA to make an impact?
Well, I think he showed a lot of leadership. You know, that team at UCLA actually, outperformed their projection because, they didn't really think that UCLA would do as well as they did. But Jaime is a guy that showed a lot of leadership and guts in the stretch there for UCLA. So I think they like his team leadership type thing.
Tom, I know you really pay attention to the international game. And every year, we're going to hear an international player. And look, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know every little thing about every single prospect. I simply don't have the time to do that. I'm not going to portray that to my listeners. I know you keep a very close eye on the international game. We've talked about the success that you have had in really pinpointing some of these players that have had success coming from the international ranks over to the NBA. Who is the best international prospect in your mind in this draft? The guy that you look at, the kid you look at and say, he's got the highest ceiling.
Well, obviously, Victor Wembanyama.
Sure. Outside of Wemby. Outside of
the obvious, yeah. I think Ryan Rupert from France is another guy at 6'7" that has a real NBA-type game. And I think that Charlotte has a good chance of getting him.
You're saying Charlotte at some point in time, not at number 2, of course. You're saying that Charlotte where would pick him up? 27?
Yeah, Ryan Rupert.
Okay, down closer to the end of the first round. But you also have the Jazz going international as well with one of their first picks, I believe 9. You have Coloby coming over from France international. So explain to me the difference and why you actually like Rupert with a higher ceiling coming at number 27.
Well, because, again, he played against some of the professionals out there, especially in exhibition games, and he showed really well against the professionals. And when you talk about, pros in Europe, they really are men.
Right.
So when they're going against teenagers or late teen guys going against 25-year-olds, that's a telltale sign.
Lastly, before I let you go, Tom, we can quickly go over these trades that have gone down. I mean, we've dissected these enough, but I'd love to get your perspective. In few words, we look at the first trade last night. The Boston Celtics move on from Marcus Smart. They bring in Porzingis. They also get 2 first-round picks in this 3-team deal. I thought the Celtics did very, very well here, considering they only take on $9 million in salary. Who wins this trade? Who did you like it for, and who didn't you like it?
Yeah, I like it for both teams, actually. I mean, look, we know the kind of problems that Memphis has with Ja Morant, and I think that Marcus Smart would be a very good influence, very steadying influence on Ja Morant. On the other side of the coin, Porzingis is, like I said at the opening of the show, that he has finally learned how to play at 7'3" as opposed to trying to be a shooting guard. And since he's learned that, it's kind of a thing where, well, now he's ready to play the game the way it should be at his size. And it's kind of similar to Kuzma. Lakers are very interested in reacquiring Kuzma because now Kuzma is ready to go ahead and play the NBA game, as we know, because he had a very good season. So some of these guys, they develop late, and then they find themselves, okay, well, I wish I would have done that when I was with Luka Doncic in Dallas. So I bet you Dallas is kicking themselves a little bit because they let him go too quickly. But I think it's a good trade for both teams, Porzingis and Smart.
Okay, now we move on to the trade that went down earlier today. Chris Paul, we knew he wouldn't be in Washington long after they acquired him. We thought maybe a buyout. There was the idea that maybe he would go to the Clippers, but instead, Washington's going to send him to the Golden State Warriors for Jordan Poole. This tells me that the Warriors are really going all in maybe for another 2 years, right? The idea that they would be in a reshift, their model was very different Here they have a bunch of young guys they're trying to mold with their championship vets. It didn't work. It didn't work out. They move on from Jordan Poole after giving him big money. Now they have CP3. I like Chris Paul. I like what he brings to the mid-range. Maybe perfect for Golden State. I know that there is some question marks behind health. But all in all, is it addition by subtraction, just getting rid of Jordan Poole in his contract?
Yeah, I think it is in a way. I mean, look, Jordan Poole turned out to be a headache after he had that wonderful 2022 season. He had a great playoff, all that stuff. And ever since, as the players call it, he got his bag full of money, $120 million or so, $140 million. His head just exploded, so to speak. And I think that Draymond Green he just couldn't take it anymore, so he knocked him out. And so yeah, he had to get out of there because he was a bad omen for Golden State Warriors. Whereas and at the end of games, he turned the ball over constantly. Whereas you can put the ball in CP3's hand, and it'll be safe in those hands. Now you've got to manage his time for sure because he is 38 years old. But I think that's a good trade for the Golden State Warriors when you think about all the things that Poole brought after that great 2022 season.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a flash in the pan, but I will say that maybe, just maybe, a change of scenery will be good for both. I am really curious to see Chris Paul and Steph Curry in the same backcourt. I mean, that's fascinating.
That is very fascinating because, both of them, of course, will make the right passes and will secure the ball. They're not going to turn the ball over.
And now, I mean, obviously, Golden State, they focus on bringing back Draymond, which I think is kind of a foregone conclusion at this point, that Draymond will be back at Golden State. And I would assume that Draymond was looking for a deal. He's not going to get $27 million on the open market. It doesn't matter if it's from Golden State or someone else. But the idea of maybe getting a 3-year, $48 million deal, I think for Draymond, locking up long-term 3-4 years is more important than 1 year of a payday at $27 million. I would expect Golden State to get this done relatively soon. Curious as to your thoughts.
No doubt about it. I mean, he's had such an impact on the success of the Warriors. They just could not let him go at this point. Plus, there's still some movement left with Golden State to get a 6'10" guy to go with, Looney and those guys, because they were hoping that their number one draft choice a couple of years ago would do it, but he didn't. So now they're going to go ahead and bank on Kumingas.
Tom Perkins, again, our guest right now as we talk about the NBA draft tonight. Tom, it is always a pleasure to get you on. Again, I love the mock draft. I know there's other news and notes, and you're going to be busy over the next few days. So go ahead and talk about hoopcitynews.com.
Yeah, we're very proud of what we did. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of intense work, and if people notice when they go to my site and they see my draft choices, top 30, if you click on the individual players, you'll see a breakdown of their game, which is kind of interesting. I've worked very hard on that. It breaks their game down as far as passing, shooting, the whole 9 yards. So go ahead and click on those names, and you'll see more than just the name.
Tom, it is always a pleasure. I appreciate it. We'll get you on next week. Maybe we can go over the aftermath.
Fantastic. Always good to talk to you, Jordan. And Jordan, you are so prepared. It's incredible.
I have no life. What can I say? My wife thinks I'm an idiot. We'll put it that way.
No, you're a great husband. Plus, you're as I said this past Sunday, you're one of those great superstar fathers.
Well, that's the most important thing. That compliment means the world, Tom. I really appreciate it.
All righty.
We're going to pause for just a moment. We do have more Drive Time Sports coming up again, counting down to the NBA draft. We'll start breaking down the trades. What does this do for the Golden State Warriors? That's coming up next here on Drive Time Sports.